Okay, everyone, and welcome to the weekend wrap up with myself, Michael Nauss from Stats Edge Trading. Again, if you're new here, welcome. Please subscribe or follow or like. Every weekend, we go through crypto, forex, stock market, try to figure out what's going on for this week, what we can do going into next week. Now, pretty wild week in the market, but I think what you'll find is that the weekly candles deal with a lot of this ourselves. So again, I'm a swing trader. I look for a couple days to a couple weeks move. So I'm using these weekly candles as a good way to zoom out and get a great idea of what is happening kind of fully, like forest for the trees type of moment here. And as always, go to Stats Edge Trading, sign up for your email list. Again, I'm working on some really cool stuff I'm going to release very soon that will go to email subscribers first, so make sure you're signed up there. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the charts. As always, we're going to start with Bitcoin, and not a huge week one way or the other, a little inside week after 2 weeks up in a row, going up into this prior zone right here. So for me, this is all I'm watching is right now this zone and how we react to it, kind of between this high right here at 48 and then all-time highs. We have this big zone where if we fail before we get to new all-time highs, I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed people out there. Now, not saying that we're going to, because certainly there is no sign that that's going to be the case, because, it's obviously a massive bull trend we're having right now. But if we did fail before we hit this high and then rolled over, I think that would cause a lot of disappointed people to potentially exit. But, you know, again, no sign of that. No bullish position, no bearish position, because we are just a little bit overextended there. Something is not overextended. We can take a look here at gold. So gold is having the classic A VWAP pinch. So an anchored VWAP from below is telling us that the average market participant from this major swing low is holding the price and averaging in, and the major market participant from this swing high is holding as well. So we put in a green candle yesterday. Let's zoom into the actual candles. So you have a hammer candle the week before, a nice green candle last week. This could be showing that it's looking to potentially break out to the upside. So I am going to be watching gold. If you really zoom out, you can see this nice cup and handle that I've been watching for a while here on gold. And then silver. Silver's been catching up to gold. It's a little bit behind, but you can see a nice hammer candle, reversal candle last week, then a little bottoming tail this week as well. So gold and silver are definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. We have more evidence for that later when we go over different stock indices, which we'll go over in a second here. So the euro came all the way back up to the anchored view out from this high this week, and the 10-week moving average, and then it failed at those two prices and pushed a little bit lower. So could be time, if we do here on the daily chart, maybe for a continuation lower, maybe test these lows or see if we can just roll a little bit here on the euro. But what's interesting, if we go to the pound, it looks quite a bit stronger. So let's just switch between these real quick. So there's the euro, big push, like 5-6 weeks in a row, and then a little push up. So looking very weak here. And then we look at the pound. And the pound just more in a base, and it's following week by week, but it hasn't pushed down nearly as much. It's still well above the anchored VWAP from this low right here, and well above the anchored VWAP from this massive swing low in 2022. So euro looks weaker than the pound that looks stronger. Beautiful that we can trade euro pound. So I had been playing this base for a while, taking bounces off this. Mixed success. I think net money on it, but nothing crazy. But this makes sense with the fact that if I think the euro is going to move lower and the pound may outperform that or not move lower, then the euro pound should have a pretty big fall in it. So I'm watching this one now for a failure of this zone next week. So It's one thing I like about currencies is that you can evaluate each of the currencies against a bunch of different other currencies, and you can paint this big picture in your head of what you think is potentially going to happen next. We look at Aussie CAD. Right? Aussie CAD is struggling at that same anchored VWAP that we saw in the euro. Bounced from this level, looks like it might be failing, so I'm going to watch this one as well, and that has to do with just going with this cross currency theme, the US dollar CAD. So US dollar CAD, this weak bounce up into this anchored VWAP. You can see every time it gets above here, there's a massive topping tail that keeps it down. So I'm going to watch US CAD here for a short next week as well. I didn't highlight that. One second. You guys are watching me do my weekend homework. That's part of this. That's one thing I love about the fact that I can do this and people are interested, is that a lot of what I'm doing right now is what I would do anyway on a Sunday morning with my tea here, is go through a bunch of weekly charts, try to figure out what I can paint in my head for what could happen this week, and then just do a lot of contemplation on that on the weekend, and then I've got my game plan for what sectors to look at going into next week. So speaking of that, let's take a look at the S&P 500. Strong week on the market. If we go into the daily chart, you see this is kind of the wildness that I was talking about a bit. So I can move this now because that's that high. My theory of chop here was wrong, or at least early. But what happened is we had the old NVIDIA earnings, right? So we had a pull down here on the anticipation of NVIDIA earnings, a massive gap after earnings, and then a little continuation here. So I'm wondering if this could potentially, if we get a big down Monday, I'm going to watch, that would complete this evening star pattern. But again, no evidence that we're going to have that yet, just a scenario I have in my mind, but just another up week. We are just frustrating the bears over and over and over again. This is what causes these pretty wild rallies in stocks, is that every time someone gets super bearish and they short the market and it looks like the market's going to tick down a bit, it takes one event to push it up. Those shorts are wrong, they have to cover, and so on and so forth, and it creates these euphoric rises. Now, I still have some longs. I've certainly been pairing them out, expecting some sort of a down move, but I'm not really interested in adding too many longs right now because of the kind of overextended of the market. I'm riding a little bit, so if we continue to go higher, I'll continue to make a little bit of money there. I'm just not super interested in getting involved in the SPY, which has a lot to do with big cap tech. If we go into the RSP, this takes out that big cap component. You can see it's still a very strong chart over the last few weeks. We still had a nice little push up here 4 or 5 weeks in after breaking out the zone, but we are still below these all-time highs right here. Okay, so let's go down the cap chain like we normally do. Let's go to MDY. So where the SPY is the large caps, MDY is the middle guys, and then we'll do IWM, which is the small guys. So still no new all-time highs on mid caps just yet. IWM is the weakest of the bunch. Still struggling with this area right here called this 201 zone that it's been fighting for some time. Just chop. This week's candle was just a little inside weak, no action there because it didn't have that NVIDIA and then semiconductor type push. You got to remember, IWM has a lot more energy and it has a lot more regional banks and small cap financials in it. So while those continue to be under pressure, this will be as well. But I think the entire world is watching this IWM base, just seeing when and if we break one way or the other. I think there'll be a move to be had there, but again, we're still chopping in the small cap space. Now, a couple names that I want to watch. Uranium. I haven't visited uranium in a while because quite often it hasn't been working for me. I got out of a lot of my uranium plays when they broke down. Now I'm watching this pullback, right? This overall chart is still bullish to me, but as always, we're not just going to buy and hold the bullish chart when it's pulling back like this. But what we're going to do is start to assess levels that it could get interesting. This anchored VWAP from these lows right here, sit around 2650-ish. We're getting close to that. Might be interesting to see what happens there for a couple weeks if we get to that level. And then if that fails, then we got $23 or so. That's where I'm watching. Again, no uranium position right now, but again, we're going to keep an eye on it. TLT. TLT actually seems to be holding this anchored VWAP right here from these lows. And this, for people who don't know, is one of my favorite plays to catch reversals. I'll never buy the thing as it's waterfalling down like this, but after a nice bounce, if it comes in, it settles at that anchored VWAP from the prior low. For me, that's an area of interest that I want to get involved if I can here. So XME, this is the more evidence I talked about earlier for metals and miners ETF. And this is where all of the gold, silver, a lot of steel, things like that are going to matter. And we have XME, we have these prior highs right here that are interesting to me. And then we have these lows right here that are also interesting. So we broke out, we came in and touched it. Big hammer candle yesterday, little inside hammer candle this week. If we can get moving here on XME, I'm going to like the look of that guy. OIH, so the oil services sector, coming back into this level right here. Talked about this for a few weeks. 3 weeks of a bounce off, kind of lackluster for me. So I'm going to look to see if this can base or move sideways for a few weeks, see if we can get a move out of that. And then we have boat. Boat is just interesting to me because we had this big gap up. This is a shipping ETF, so it has all of the boat shippers. And the idea is big gap up and then some sideways consolidation. So if we can break out here, it could be a good idea for shippers. Last but not least, we have IBB. And IBB has a nice bull flag here that potentially could break out. If we zoom out, you can see this high seems to be very important, going back for a while. And then if we look at our monthly chart that I always have down here in the corner, you can see if this area breaks, there's nothing really in our way until potentially highs here. So I'm watching this biotech sector or this IBB. When it comes to individual trades, again, there's not a lot that I'm watching too closely, just because of, let's go to the daily chart, because of the overextension in the market. I think that will make for a rough trading environment. But this ZIM, I am still interested in. We have a 27% short float on this, so it came up on one of my short float scanners here in Trade Ideas. Use Stats Edge to save yourself 25% off at checkout. The idea is simply, we're holding the 200-day moving average. There is an anchored VWAP from this swing low right here that's interesting, that we're holding as well, and then that massive short float. So if we can get a bounce off this zone, this is a shipper, so it'd be in that boat ETF. And if the shorts have to go, then they have to go. That's great. We have VRDN. That's the same kind of setup. Nice big push up. I talked about this on TLT and how I like this setup. So I'm just watching a couple of these for stocks as well, looking to see if the market moves, is there going to be some rotation into names that will kind of catch up. Toast is another one. We broke out on earnings. We've pulled back here, closed the gap on earnings, and now it looks like we may want to continue higher. So those are some individual names that I'm watching. And that's it for this weekend. So thank you all for coming out. Go to statsedgetrading.com. Sign up for the email list there. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend and get away from the screens.